Welcome to the latest edition of the OmniTalk Retail Ask an Expert series. I'm your host, Chris Walton.
And I'm Mezzenga.
And we are the founders of OmniTalk, the fast-growing retail media outlet that is all about the companies, the people, and the technologies that are coming together to shape the future of retail. Or as we like to say, Anne, the media organization that focuses on tomorrow, today. And today we are going into, I'm going to do my Doc Brown into the future, Anne.
Oh my gosh. I wonder how many people watching this are actually aware of that reference.
Oh, everyone knows Doc Brown from Back to the Future. Everyone does.
I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still acting. So technically, yes.
Yeah, barely probably. But by that, I mean, we are going to ask the question of what will physical stores look like in 2027? I could not be more excited about that topic. And joining us to discuss what the smart store of the future looks like is Roy Horgan, SES-imagotag's Group SEVP of Strategy, Marketing, and Communications. Roy, welcome to OmniTalk.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
You're our own Irish version of Marty McFly for this episode, Roy. I hope that you're okay with that.
Yeah, well, the DeLorean was Irish.
He was, yes. Great reference.
So it was manufactured, so it's fitting. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. It was in Belfast, right, Roy?
That's
John
right.
DeLorean, right? Yep.
DeLorean, exactly.
God, it all comes full circle, Ann. It all comes full circle.
I shouldn't have knocked the Back to the Future reference. I absolutely shouldn't, but I am really excited. There's so many of you joining us today. We are thrilled to be able to really take a look. It's more exciting than the Back to the Future as far as I'm concerned.
It honestly is. It definitely is for us. I know. And this is, for those watching on LinkedIn, this is our most registered event in the history of OmniTalk. And I'm not even talking like close. I'm talking like blew the previous high away, like hugely away. I think at the, it's just insane. But thank you to everyone for your support and thanks for tuning in. And so for those that are watching this discussion live, just a quick reminder that if you want to ask your questions of Roy, of me, of Ann, or anyone else in the chat at any time, please do so via the chat session window on the right-hand side of your screen. Roy, I know, is already dying to take your questions.
Yes. Roy, I want to get started. Let's kick this off by giving people a little bit of insight into your background and your role at SES-imagotag.
Yeah, so my own background, actually, I go, retail is in my blood. I come from a family business that were and have been in retail for about 102 years now.
Really?
Food distribution, but we started off with butcher shops and now we're an artisan food distributor. So that's my family business and my background, and that's in Ireland. So it is very, very near and dear to me. So but actually my professional background is in finance. So I was in finance and then I went in and did a couple of startups, one of which was a company called Market Hub, which is a data analytics startup for retail. And actually when I started Market Hub, I was approached by the founders of SES-imagotag, and they approached me with regards to selling electronic shelf edge labels, and I thought that was a great idea. However, I think it needed data as part of the story. And then as it transpired in February of this year, SES-imagotag acquired Market Hub, and I became who I suppose fulfill today the role of marketing, communications, and strategy for the group.
Roy, why did you feel like that data component was so essential when you started to look at what SES-imagotag was offering retailers?
I get it in terms of electronic shelf edge labels were everywhere on continental Europe. However, in Europe, it was largely driven by legislation, and then with the emergence of the euro, you had dual pricing. However, in the UK and in Ireland, in the US, that wasn't the case. We didn't see them, and we didn't know the technology. However, so we needed to have more of a compelling reason to adopt technology like this, because the legislation still existed, but it wasn't enforced, right? So it's still illegal to display an incorrect price at the shelf. But it wasn't and it isn't been enforced, which I believe is a mistake. However, a compelling reason like data, so giving someone the insight to act and the actionable data, that's really compelling. So that was our premise, that was our hypothesis, and it manifested itself to be true, right? It became now part and parcel. You think about this technology, and it's, it is a conduit for data and an execution of data. So yeah, we're there.
Yeah, Roy, I want to ask you more about that. I want to stay on this topic for a little bit. I want to stay on the electronic shelf labels idea, because when Ann and I particularly look at the smart store of the future, in quotes, Joy Tribbiani quotes, one of the essential ingredients that we've long espoused is the use of electronic shelf labels. So based on the conversation we've already had, I no doubt you probably agree with that. But why do you think we're seeing retailers, across the globe really start to adopt them at an ever increasing pace here?
Yeah. Look, I suppose we don't need to, but we will state the obvious. So right now, obviously, price inflation, labor shortages, and the need for more automation, clearly, and the costs are rising. So, now is its time in terms of a technology that automates a task that doesn't need to be done by humans, right? Because they can do other things in store. So that it's obvious, right? It's obvious why that would happen right now. However, and more is to the point, it's the emergence of things like the cloud, right? So your ability to roll this technology out through your Wi-Fi infrastructure. So what we've done, and we've at SES, we've a cloud infrastructure called Fusion, and it's a cloud infrastructure, and it's an operating system that can allow you to roll out electronic shelf edge labels through your existing network. So no wiring, no installation. It's not only a rapid deployment of in hundreds, if not thousands of stores. It's also, from a sustainability perspective, you don't have to physically go and drive and fit wires or go through conduit or pull out asbestos. It's already fitted. So you're leveraging an existing network, and that has made a huge difference. Absolutely massive.
Right. And I'm curious too, like there's always, I love your point about inflation and the labor supply shortage too, but haven't you, the other thing that's been interesting to me watching this from afar and hearing people talk about it at places like Grocery Shop and Shop Talk, it seems like you're also finding more use cases for the labels themselves too, right? Like there's, of course, this reduction in savings of having to print signs and all that, but like third-party picking gets simplified by this as well. Talk to us about that. Like, what are some of the other use cases that have been emerging over these past few years that are driving this adoption?
Absolutely. So first and foremost is the infrastructure, but then it's what you do with it, right? So that's why, and I think at the start I did say like it was a conduit to data, but it's also a conduit. It's the infrastructure. If you're thinking about a physical store and you're thinking about digitalization of the store, surely one of those points is the point where the consumer interacts with products, and but also operatives, in-store operatives interact with those products. So that shelf is the most important thing in a physical store, right? So either it's
good point.
It got to be stocked, and it got to be fulfilled and replenished, and that's where both consumers see information about their products, and also operatives in store see information about the products. So what we've seen is huge number of, I suppose, compelling business cases, but also products. So we're productizing that physical shelf. And how that actually works, and how it works is through a combination of technology. So if you look at the infrastructure, it's your IoT infrastructure, and then you have data. So you're pushing through in terms of that point, at that very point where a consumer makes their decision. So they see the product, they see the price, and then they have information about that product. And we think that that's a huge opportunity, and that's also a really exciting. From my perspective, it's probably the most exciting opportunity in the data world, because obviously you can impact how consumers buy and where they buy and how they buy, and give them more information. And beyond that, we've developed a technology called Captana, which is vision analytics or vision technology. So looking at the physical space, physical product, and the gap, and fulfillment then hangs off that. So then you start to look at how you then can navigate customers through the store, navigate operatives through the store, through geolocation and in-store picking. So for me, actually, they're day-to-day operations within a store that we're automating. So this is not, we're not trying to change in-store operations from changing how consumers buy or how people, we just want to make them better, more efficient, We're very much focused on that retail operations, retail profitability, so that below the line, but also hopefully above the line. And then the next element is the emergence of in-store advertising, in-store media, because the physical store essentially is a cookie-less world, right? So
right.
Online, we have, consumers go online and they've you have a 4% conversion rate in terms of a typical shop online. In a physical store, it's more like probably 94%. But it's dark for a lot of brands and a lot of retailers. So again, there lies a huge opportunity. So we're starting to see retailers really, really adopt and engage in terms of their ability to create, I suppose, that hybrid, that convergence of the digital and physical.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you said there too, because what it gets me started to think about, and I wrote about this too in an article when I kind of hypothesized, remember, Anne, like what is Black Friday going to look like? And one of the cool things that came out of that kind of thought exercise that we did was, and it gets to what you're talking about, which is the electronic shelf label is really a tool for so many things. And it's a tool that, the way I would put it, it helps calibrate supply and demand better than anything else out there. And so I think that's a really powerful statement when you start to think about it. But I want to shift now. I know Anne wants to ask you about the future. So that's today, but let's start talking 5 to 10 years out.
What else has to be kind of true in these future store environments, or what are you seeing a lot of partnerships with, like other technologies, or what are you providing with SES?
Yeah, well, look, I believe the store of the future, as we called it, the store 2027, is the store of the modern moment. And what I mean by that is, right now, today, right? So when you think about what we're dealing with today, where that is the modern moment, right? Today, it's price inflation. It is, shortage of labor. It is, very, very tough on high street and shopping mall competition. So that's our modern moment. And in 2027 and beyond, the reality is we're moving towards a convergence of digital and physical. I think the physical store has to play a huge part in the community of any town or any city. And in order to do that, it's not just us. It's not. I believe what we're doing at SES and through our platform Fusion is a conduit and an ability to connect the physical store. However, a lot of the time that store is dark, right? So you have your ERP systems or your point of sale systems. Your shelf is not connected. It's not connected to the consumer digitally, and it's not connected back online. We don't want to be the sole platform, the sole operating system. We believe that it's through data. So that might be third-party data. It might be provenance of a product. It might be information about the packaging of that product. It could be about that in-store media. So allowing CPGs to see their shelf, allowing retailers to see what's physically on the shelf, see how it degrades over the course of a day. Then piggybacking in terms of other technologies like real-time planogram, or in-store payments, or at the shelf picking, or in store fulfillment, or using third-party apps like DoorDash. We're a conduit to allow those technologies also to exist through pick to light and fulfill to light and things like that. So in my mind, it is a combination of lots of technologies to improve and enhance both the operatives and the customer experience. That's where we're really trying to work hard and to open up that platform so those solutions can exist in the physical store.
Roy, I'm curious. I think, a lot of us listening, or a lot of people attending the event right now, we're familiar with shelf labels because of their prevalence in grocery. But I'm curious, I know we have some people who are attending from Lululemon, from other apparel retailers. We just were at the Market by Macy's. We saw shelf electronic labels being used in the shoe department. I mean, how do you kind of see this continue to expand outside of the grocery vertical and into some of the other categories?
Yeah, look, again, grocery is huge, right?
Yeah.
It's been the primary growth of our business. However, it's not in isolation in terms of we start to see, look, the reality is sustainability is everywhere, right? In terms of, so a lot of retailers, and especially on that apparel side, are using the ESL or the digital as nearly like an endless aisle, right? So if you have limited space or if you have a wide range, how can you use that as a way to, whether it's a QR code or it's a contactless, or even using that device as a way to get more sizes and to have better customer experience, because in a physical store you can't cover the whole range,
Right.
so we're fundamentally encouraging our customers to start thinking of the digital shelf as that endless aisle, and to go deeper in terms of their connection between the physical store and their online world. So this is obviously we're seeing a continual growth in terms of online, but the physical store is one. Obviously you have physical people there, so you can talk and you can buy, and then you can get advice, and then it's how do you make it seamless to go straight to increase that range that you mightn't have in a physical store. And that's where apparels are starting to use the technology to much better effect. And also industrial, we see huge industrial business. We have a very, very strong emerging industrial business too. So whether that is in geolocation, in terms of asset tracking, I think there's just not just in grocery, there's a whole range of verticals that we're starting to see.
Roy, I want to ask you too. I want to go back to, you mentioned Captana before, and and the idea of computer vision and that being a key piece of this IoT kind of puzzle here 5 to 10 years out as we start talking about the store of the future in 2027. Talk more about that. Like how does that come into play, operationally for the retailer when they're getting the benefits of the computer vision within this theorized design system?
Yeah, well, look, I think you can put it into very simple terms, right? So we see a range of retailers that are running at sub 90% on shelf availability, right? And in this IoT world, so if you physically, and the reason that's happening is maybe it's supply chain issues, maybe it's just poor execution in store in terms of fulfillment. But if you have sight of what that physical shelf looks like during the day, and you can connect that back to POS or some type of an ERP system, then your fulfillment and how you fulfill and how you navigate that fulfillment can go to the point that you need it most. It's when that product is sold and when it's physically available, and when consumers buy, because there's no point in doing, for instance, fulfillment in certain products that are not selling in the morning. It's more of an afternoon product. So the triage, or how you navigate the operatives in store, because you have sight of what's on the physical shelf, and you can communicate that back through a notification to their handhelds, their PDAs. That's hugely compelling, because then it's more effective. And if I even think about it, right, if you think about it in the simplest form, how many steps are our operatives or our colleagues doing in store in a physical day, and how many of those are productive? So if I can make those steps, we all have a device on our wrist to tell us how many steps we're doing, but how many of them are effective? So if I can navigate you to the most effective step and the most effective task, I can only do that by a combination of knowing what's on the physical shelf, linking it back to data, your data ERP systems or your POS systems. And that's what Captana does. And it does it extremely effectively, because it's designed to be extremely lightweight in terms of infrastructure. And it's an IoT device. And that's what SES does best. We manage hundreds of millions of IoT devices, and you're going to see more and more of these in the store. So it's not just a case of we're good, you have to be good at data. You have to be good at managing the physical IoT device in the store and network of sensors that you're going to start to see in a physical store. That's not easy.
So Roy, I mean, I just to kind of like expand on all these things that we're talking about of what the store looks like in 2027. so you discuss it's going to be, you know, more digital. We're going to be bringing everything together to make sure that we have, you know, you're allowing the technology that you're investing in to do more things, to be connected, to be talking to one another. Is there like specific, I mean, obviously SES-imagotag is focused on shelf or ESL shelf labels or you know, digital labels. But what other adjacent technologies are you seeing that are filling in really well as the people listening are kind of trying to figure out, like, what's this puzzle piece to put together of these technologies that will build a successful 2027 store?
Yeah, well, look, I can only talk about what I see on a day-to-day basis, right? So we have one retailer, and they're probably one of the most astute retailers that I've seen in terms of their use of analytics and data.
Okay.
So, and you know, data is as only good as the accuracy of the insight or the analytics that you derive from the data.
Right.
One of the things that they've used to quite effective, I suppose, results is the electronic shelf edge label gives them 1 point of reference in terms of their data, that they know there's the physical product on the shelf because it's linked to a label. Then that data that they see in terms of their analytics program, it gives them insights, but it allows them then to filter those insights into what's physically in their stores. So they started to build, so they're a small retailer at about a billion turnover in Ireland, and they have about 50 stores. And what they started to do is their 51st store that they were opening, they started to look at, well, how do we build a store that data built? Meaning, how can we increase the product certainty in a store that it will sell every month? So typically they were running at, for products that were selling every month, they're running at between their estate, about 69 to 85% of products within their range and in their categories were selling every month. So then they started to pull back all the data from their whole estate, and they started to see trends in terms of products that are selling and not selling. So then the 51st store was built on the basis of a store that data built, meaning that they only put products in that they saw that were selling in the rest of their estate. They achieved in the first month of trading a 98% rate of sale of all the products in that store, meaning so they took the guesswork out of their planograms. They took their building other categories, and they coined the phrase "the store that data built." And I love it because
that's a great phrase.
And that to me is the most powerful thing. It's how do you take one piece of technology and start to build the layers? And it's not all from us. The analytics actually was from us, but it's also their insight, their know-how, and their knowledge, and their certainty that it would work. And that to me was, that to me is the proof of the pudding, because they took this on themselves to do things differently in an environment where a lot of the time, maybe their stores are deteriorating, but now they're trusting data and the execution of the data in the store. And that to me gives me huge hope. Every store underperforms, every store can do better. And it's a combination of, good technology, great execution of technology, and insights that deliver better results.
Yeah, I think there's 2 points for me that I want to bring home in what you just said too, and going back to what you said even before that too, like the idea of sight, actual visibility to what's happening in the store being a key piece of any IoT functioning store here in the future is absolutely important. And the other point too is really the idea that the data is key, and if you do it right, to your point, you can even build your own store on it, like in a unique way. But that's also a key piece for the retailers to understand too, is you have to understand what data you want, which is something we always hear from the use of, or for the companies that are ahead of this on the IoT perspective, is, okay, how do I interpret there's so much data that comes at me. How do I interpret what's right for me? And then how do I manage by exception the data that I want to operate my store? Do you have any thoughts on that, Roy? I'm curious. Like, have you seen anyone do that well, or any food for thought on or advice you give to people watching on how to combat that issue?
Look, we're looking at one retailer what we want retailers to do is thrive, right? So to do that, I call them our retail heroes. There are retailers out there that are actually, even in this environment, are thriving. And I have one example of, we were at Tech for Retail last week in Paris, and Monoprix presented at that event, and they were talking about the use of in-store replenishment, on-shelf availability, and how they applied this to their stock files and their replenishment. They're running at about 200 basis points ahead of their peers right now, which again is a great example of a retailer that, in an environment where retailers are finding it tougher, because they have products on stock, they're running at about 96% on-shelf availability, right? So they have more opportunity to be successful than someone's running at 89%, right? So I think, again, I would lean towards retailers that have, they say, when do you plant a tree? It's like 20 years ago, right? So they invested in this technology, and 5-6 years ago, and they're getting the benefit of it now. And that's a really key message of ours is, the store 2027 starts now, right? It starts now. You have to go, people are looking at, Wi-Fi 6, and they're looking at, geolocation in store, and they're starting to think about their omni-channel approach. They're starting to think about, well, how do we generate more revenue in a store? Because again, you're starting to see, because of what we're seeing, an onslaught of advertisers cutting their social media budgets.
Right.
But there's no reason why that budget couldn't move to a physical store, because again, your chances of the consumer seeing that are much greater. So I think if you want to leverage, or if you want to take hold of that income, you need to start thinking about it now, right? Not in 5 years' time, not in when someone else has figured it out. So that's why those heroes, they're people right now, retailers right now, are thinking about, how do they execute digital in store? How do they execute digital pricing? How do they leverage that infrastructure? And it's now, because in 2027, it's too late, right? It's already done.
Yeah, and I could even make the argument that if you're not investing now, you're already too late. Like, you probably need to get on this even a little bit earlier than that too. But to that point, let's get down to the brass tacks then here too, Roy. Like, financially, what is the incentive now for retailers to invest in these types of technologies, the IoT technologies, to make the store run in this way, as we're hypothesizing here?
Yeah, well, look, do you know what the financial incentives are? Like, things like, so I'm sure we're seeing, again, increasing food waste going up in stores, because operationally we're getting a little bit poor. So you could have world-class food waste statistics. You could have world-class on-shelf availability. You have a pick rate in store that is 50% higher than your peers, because you're using, pick to light and geolocation in the store. So you're starting to look at, well, what does a store run at operationally, or from a P&L perspective, versus its peers? And it should be, and it can run at 200 to 300 basis points higher than its peers. And there lies the opportunity. So that's a return on investment. A lot of the time people are saying, look, well, what's my return on investment in paper? In paper, like, it's tiny in terms of the relative opportunity, in terms of, above the line, I suppose, growth, and above the line, I suppose, benefits. So don't look at it in how many pieces of paper I'm saving. Look at it about how many times a day could I fulfill the right product at the right time, versus just sending someone around to do a cycle every single day. And then it's nuts that you would think like that, because pure play online retailers don't think like that. We should be like, you look at Shopify, what they have in terms of the analytics and the targeting and the retargeting that they give to their startups that start they start on a Monday, and then Tuesday they have this wealth of information. We need to give that to physical retailers, and to do that in a physical world.
And Roy, one last thing on this topic too, that you said to me, a couple of weeks ago when we were, starting to talk about this interview and putting together some of the promotional materials for it too. You said the cost pressures in this space are really intense too. I think you said something like, if I remember right, you said like 15 percentage points of margin is going to be required to counteract the pressures that are coming. What did you mean by that when you said that to me? Because I think it was an important point to bring home for the audience.
Yeah, so like if you're seeing like you can take the data from listed companies, right? So essentially a lot of listed retailers, especially in this part of the world, but also obviously with a huge I suppose customer base in North America as well, we're starting to see their profits essentially halve, right? So right now their profits are halving, and in order to sustain the profits that they enjoyed or have experienced over the last 5 years, they're going to need to look for either operational cost savings in terms of the operating expenses, or about 15% increase in their terms of their gross margins. Okay. And right now our customer is able to I suppose take another 15% increase in terms of the cost of goods. Probably not, right? So we're going to have to go to operating expenses, or that in a store. And again, labor is either hard to find or it's cut. So where do you find that kind of margin to improve the bottom line? And actually what I'm saying, and the message, hopefully that it becomes clear, is it's there. It's there, but it takes a little bit of I suppose joint up thinking in terms of how all these things operate in the store. So that's what I'm saying. Like it's again, we see that from retailers, our heroes, the heroes that are actually achieving growth in a market that is, and this is not just discount retailers. These are premium retailers, or people mid-level retailers and mid-cap retailers. The ones that have invested 5 years ago probably are better positions to weather we're going to experience in the next couple of years.
Well, Roy, I want to ask you a question, because you have your retail heroes examples that you've talked about in Europe. You also have clients in North America. What do you think in terms of like how quickly we might start to see the US market move more in this direction? I mean, are we really talking 2027? Could it be sooner? Based on all of the retailers that you're working with and that you can look at, what's your prediction there?
Yeah, so look, even though the numbers to you guys might seem small, we've 4,000 stores already installed in North America, right? However, the exciting thing is, over the next 5 years, we're starting to see. So the market today is growing at over 50% compounded annual growth in terms of the deployment of digital pricing and digital tags in physical stores. North America will surpass Europe in deployment of these devices by 2027, right? So you're not only going to catch up in typical American form, you're going to win, right? It's happening. The die is cast in terms of what's happening in North America in terms of the deployment of these solutions. And as I said, what really helped that is the emergence of cloud, the emergence of our Fusion infrastructure allows you to piggyback off existing Wi-Fi and existing networks. It's super important to see that scalability in terms of security and interoperability of systems have all allowed this to accelerate at the pace, and it's quite exciting actually how quick it's growing in North America.
Yeah, it's fascinating to listen to and think back, because like when you talk about the margin pressures of online, those are really real, and you can see why retailers have been slow to invest in them, because in a way it starts to mean the end of the business overall,
right?
And so getting this interoperability and investing there just makes a ton of sense as the best countermeasure to where the customer is leading you in the digital space, but doing it by way of your most profitable center, which is the store. So Roy, my last question to get you out of here on this is really, we're as guilty as anyone, Ann and I particularly, we'll take full credit for that, actually, of getting potentially at times even too geeked up about retail technology. So my question for you to close is, like, given all the fun stuff we've talked about today, is there a bigger why in terms of why thinking about store design in 2027 matters?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I don't know about you, but I love going into a physical store, right? I love it, right? It's, for me, it's the heart of the community, right? So
Right.
I find it, I find it so, in my mind, it's so important that the physical store must survive, right? And thrive. And to do that, it needs to be at the center of the community. So if that is in-store fulfillment and, micro fulfillment, it's not only important that it survives from a community perspective, but from a sustainability perspective, right? So, why do we need to, like, we were looking at this, right? So, so if, based on the numbers in terms of how online retail is going to continue to grow, that would require about 0.5 gigaton of carbon to be emitted through the new, I suppose, construction of fulfillment centers to serve this, if that was just the only way of doing it.
Right.
What we're starting to see is retailers are starting to leverage their existing stores as micro fulfillment centers. And that actually it's not only important from a community perspective, but from an environmental perspective, it's important, right? So foregoing the need to build, millions of square feet of concrete to do, out of town fulfillment, and it's also, it's what people want, right? People want the store, and people want these, maybe it does change, right? We have more concessions, different things happening in these stores, but people want their physical stores to still exist, and they want to go, they want that community to be centered around these things. And I think, and again, I think that to me is why there's a bigger why for this. This is important. That's where, I suppose, if we do anything, we have to impart that message too, in terms of our customers, that their physical stores are their greatest asset. So let's leverage them.
Yeah, that's why I want to end on that question. That was a great answer too. Like the part of the reason this is important is it's also a more sustainable future for all of us if we start to think about it in this way.
Yeah.
Well, Roy, that was wonderful. If people listen to this, they want to dive into you further, they want you to do more of your Marty McFly predictions, what is the best way for them to get in contact with you to learn more about SES-imagotag and about working with you?
Well, firstly, they can go onto our website, as SES-imagotag.com, or they can email us at info@ses-imagotag.com, or they can come see us at NRF in January, where we will be there front and center to answer any of their questions, bring them through a journey. And that's really where we're going, is, how do you start, and what's the steps to getting started, and where do you think we can end up, and hopefully telling, real retail stories, not just about, technology or IoT or data. It's how it all comes together in terms of real retail stories. So come see us at NRF, or reach out to us, and we'd love to help.
We might see you at NRF too.
Yeah, we might.
Perhaps we might be stopping by the SES-imagotag.
That's right, because I heard on Sunday and Monday, and we're actually going to be live streaming from the booth as well, which I'm super excited about. Yes. Yeah, it's going to be great. We're going to have a blast.
We're going to have the 2 best chairs in the house for you two guys. We can't wait to have you guys out there, and it'll be exciting because I think we're going to talk about a lot of thought leadership, innovation, and hopefully have some great guests.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's our plan anyway, Anne.
Yes. All right. That wraps us up. Thanks to Roy Horgan for sitting down with us today, and to all of you who joined us live on LinkedIn. And as always, on behalf of all of us here at Omni Talk Retail, be careful out there.